Hello everyone, I'm Yasumi. So welcome to my YouTube tech channel, Yasumi. And today I'm going to do a discussion with the global AI expert. It's Paul Levy. If you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, do subscribe and stay tuned for some awesome discussions. I'm going to bring you with some global experts, top voices around the globe, covering different tech topics. So let me introduce Paul. Paul Levy is a writer, thinker, a conversifier, collusion breaker, and founder of both FringeReview and CATS3000. So you may not have heard about them if you are still exploring the field of AI. If you are an AI enthusiast, you must have heard about these things. So we'll meet him and ask about these details, and today I'll be covering the future of AI with the general rise of it and Technosophy with Paul Levy. Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
And
How are you?
yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm in a bit of a not very nice meeting room, so if it's a bit echoey, it's because it's a meeting room at the university that has no windows.
Ah, okay. So you are not disturbed with this discussion, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll introduce. So I have my tech channel, YouTube channel, Yasumi. So that's why I thought of doing some AI-based tech topics. So since you told, we can discuss about AI, general AI, and about the Technosophy. So let's discuss about those things. First of all, so how are you?
Yeah, all good here. Yeah, just enjoying the beginning of spring into summer, but it's mostly cold in the UK.
Okay. So, and since I know a bit about yourself because of the MKI family, can you give a brief introduction so that my audience will get to know who's Paul
Sure.
and what?
So I guess if you ask who I am, I have to give lots of different answers because I guess one answer to that is I'm a writer and I've written books in the field of technology, particularly around wisdom and technology and the skills and the ethics of technology, more recently about AI. I'm wearing the hat of an academic who's done research into that area, also in the fields of change and creativity and leadership. I have a theatre company called Rational Madness Theatre, and I make theatre usually themed on those things that I'm interested in researching. I'm the founder and editor of a magazine in the theatre world called FringeReview as well, and I'm a facilitator.
Yeah. So I saw that you are the founder of FringeReview as well as that CATS3000.
Yeah,
Am
so
I spelling it right?
CATS3000 is my kind of crazy creativity change consultancy.
Okay. And yeah, so you are writing, thinking, and doing great stuff to AI as well. So let's jump into today's discussion topic. So how would you describe the current landscape of AI adoption and development, particularly in relation to your work and observations?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to give you a little bit of a challenging answer in some ways, because one of the terms that we hear all around the world is the expression AI is rising. And it's very cleverly chosen language, often from the business world particularly, that there is some kind of inevitability about the rise of artificial intelligence, that somehow it's our destiny, somehow this is the right moment in evolution, that somehow we would be wrong not to accept that it's rising. When something is rising, you can think about the sun is rising. You know, we can't stop the sun rising. It's natural. Sometimes you hear about a monster rising from the deep, you know, something that's so big that we can only look at it and get out of its way or accept it. And this is a carefully chosen metaphor because I don't believe AI is rising at all. If anything, AI is falling. It's landing on us. And whether you see that in biblical terms as like the fall from paradise, it's a very powerful thing that actually is landing on us right now. And so people look up and see what's coming from the sky casting a big shadow, and they're not sure if they're big enough to get out of the way of it. Actually, what's rising is humanity. Humanity has been evolving and developing for a long time. We seem to have gone through a phase called the Industrial Revolution. And during that time, we also had the birth of natural science and materialistic science that has a very, very clear atheistic view that there is nothing spiritual in the world anymore, that human beings are just machines. Ultimately, we will prove them to be machines. And the current idea about AI is rising is somehow AI is rising to rescue these machines, because our machines have bad memories, we can't think very well, we're very clumsy, we don't live very long. And actually, I call it the narrative of disgust in a lot of places, that the only way humanity has a future to evolve any further is somehow to meet the rising of AI with acceptance or submission. And that's a narrative that a lot of people now have submitted to. They press the submit button, which means surrender. And that's not necessarily the way at all. If we say that humanity is rising, humanity is continuing to develop its consciousness, it's developing its physicality, we're growing, we are becoming more skillful in some ways in the world, and also we're creating problems that go with that too, because we still have a lot of DNA around survivalism and competitiveness, and there are lots of different views about that. But if humanity is rising, then for me, that then creates the narrative that artificial intelligence is a tool that we can develop as part of our rising. We then have mastery over it. We then decide what it wants to be. We don't need to submit to the narrative of it rising, particularly because that narrative is being generated largely by certain very, very powerful corporations. And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. It is just simply the fact that most of this innovation is coming from a very small number of very, very rich people. And so my view around AI is artificial intelligence, before we even look at what it is in a context that is worth challenging.
Yeah. So since you told about this human collaboration with AI, so how can humans and AI systems collaborate effectively to maximize the benefits and address the limitations based on the current status of the AI involvement in our lives?
Yeah, well, I guess think about the metaphor again about how do we collaborate with AI. Then we've accepted that narrative. And I don't think we need to collaborate with AI. Is that what we have done is we've invented and innovated complex computing, which has become so complex now, it's demonstrating similarity, the ability to simulate human intelligence and to actually simulate human intelligence to higher levels of performance than human beings can achieve. But to require that, it requires us to have a very narrow definition of intelligence, being largely located in the brain within certain cognitive functions of the brain. And actually, we have other views of intelligence, that intelligence takes place over time. Intelligence only reveals its wisdom over time. Intelligence is embodied. We have intelligence in our feet. We have intelligence in our eyes and in our nose. And we have intelligence collectively in our context as well. So we don't need to collaborate with AI. What we need to do is look at what this technology is and scrutinize it and go at safe levels for all of humanity with it, and to put it to the use currently, I would suggest, of the damage we've done to the planet. So we probably need to look at how AI can help us with health, with well-being, with sustainability, dealing with poverty in the world, climate change, all of those things. But we have to see it very much as something that we are the subjects of, and it is the object of. It's not something we need to collaborate with. And even though it can be made to simulate human beings, that doesn't make it human. It doesn't even make it a life force, a life entity at the moment at all. Now, that might happen in the future, particularly when biology is also put into the laboratory as it's being done now. We might really then start to get artificial intelligence as we grow brains in laboratories and grow and develop stuff. But at the moment, we have complex computing, machine learning. Take away some of the language around neural networks. There are similarities to brain processes, but in no way at the moment have we in any way proven that AI is in any way artificial intelligence. It's computing.
Yeah. So based on that, I can understand that it will impact all the society and workforce involving like our lifestyles, jobs, education, everything. So what are the social implications of AI for which will be used for the impact of jobs and if I say generally the society and the workforce?
Sure. Well, when I hear the narratives around AI being a useful tool, I'm really excited about it. It can help predict earthquakes. It can help isolate cancers and create personalized treatments. But there's lots of things that we can use AI for. But the idea that somehow the human being simply needs to be replaced by computers is no way proven sociologically, economically, or in any other way at all. Again, it's based on a narrative of disgust at the current human condition, which I actually believe to be quite beautiful in all of our mediocrity as we continue to develop. So AI can be used to augment us, but whether it needs to be on a line of replication or replacement, I very, very much doubt. And the example I often give to my students sometimes, I simply ask them is, I don't know if they have memories of when they were 4 or 5. I don't know if you can remember, Yasumi, when you were very young and the first time you might have been taken to a playground and you're trying to climb a climbing frame or maybe a tree. And maybe if you're lucky, you have a parent there who is not interfering. They're allowing you to develop those animalistic skills of motor skills of climbing a tree and learning to develop confidence. And sometimes you fall and your parent is there to catch you so you don't hurt yourself too badly. But sometimes you fall and you get a little gash on your knee. But if a robot park keeper comes along and simply says to the parent, I got this, picks the child up and puts them at the top of the tree, how does that help that child to develop? Certainly it would lead to muscle wasting. And ultimately, if we keep doing that, the children won't need legs and so on. So we have to be really, really careful about where AI augments us in a healthy way and when what it simply does is serve the interests of corporations that need us to largely be sitting without moving our legs, ideally plugged into the internet, looking at products that are being advertised. That's not necessarily a narrative that any of us needs, and it certainly hasn't been sociologically studied, and it certainly hasn't been proven that humanity needs to go to a place of excarnation, of getting out of these terrible, clumsy, biological, physical bodies to somehow be eternally godlike digitally. It's a narrative that largely serves consumerism. It doesn't in any way currently serve the healthy development of human beings. And I'm excited about AI. I'm really excited about how we consciously use it. I'm far less excited about the idea it's inevitably rising and we need to submit to it.
Yeah, as you told, so we are not excited about how to get it. So we have to implement the things, and we can actually use AI to resolve for many problems. We can use AI as a solution and to optimize our work, optimize the jobs as well. So when we talk about this AI, we have to talk about these ethical considerations of AI as well. So we often hear about technical advancements of AI, but what about the ethical considerations and the potential risks we will face when we are using AI? And what are the ethical challenges you foresee at the moment? As well as how can we ensure that we can have a responsible development and a deployment of AI?
And I think that's where we have a difficulty, because if we take capitalism to its complete extreme, we could argue that there are no ethics, essentially. The only ethic is the capitalism. So that means that if AI can cheat, if it can lie, if it can manipulate us, in whatever way, if it can maximize somebody's money at the expense of someone else, if you take that extreme view, there are no responsible uses of AI, essentially. But if what we take, as most people do, whether they are religious or not, and I'm not coming from a religious place, if you're a humanist, for example, and you believe, therefore, that lying, for example, cheating, stealing, if you believe in some of the fundamentals about tolerance and not being racist or sexist or not compromising the freedom of another person to think, then we have to make sure that AI follows all of the similar rules that we would normally have for what we would call responsible society. And those have been written down and they are often embodied in law. And so one view is that we need to simply apply those rules to AI. But the problem is that AI itself, of course, is unique. With AI, vast amounts of data can be stored. That data can be transferred. Your image as I talk to you and my image as you talk to me, does that belong to me? Do I have rights to it? Or is it possible for somebody simply to take that image and use it as if it's their own, which is currently taking place in generative AI, and it hasn't really played out in court But if you take some photographs, if you made some music, can another organization simply take it? And there are currently big arguments around companies like Spotify and changing terms and conditions about if I record a podcast or make some music and post it even on a platform, does that platform then have the right not only to redistribute it, but to sell it as their own, to modify it, to change it? Now, some people would say that's irresponsible. And so there are no absolute views of what is responsible at the moment, unless we collectively agree that there are immutable, almost eternal values that we used to take for granted, like you shouldn't be violent to somebody, you shouldn't imprison somebody against their will. There were certain views that were you shouldn't lie to somebody, and so on. If they still operate, well, part one is we need to operate the laws that we currently have, but part two is we have to adapt them because AI has these unique abilities to take our data, to move our data, to change our data, to simulate it, recreate it, to follow us in a drone, follow us home as a drone flies. Ultimately, we probably have to articulate those. And that's what the United Nations is trying to do. That's what the EU in the US currently are trying to create. I think at the moment they seem to be mostly guidelines, but some people are saying it's urgent that we have laws as well, because otherwise at some point AI is going to kill a lot of people.
Yeah, actually, that was the other question I wanted to ask following the above questions, or what kind of the regulation we need, how important this regulatory oversight in AI development, and what measures should be taken in place to foster the innovation while ensuring the safety and the fairness. As you told, like I can use your image and even podcasts, I can publish them, but there should be a way of regulating the rules. Yeah.
But I guess beyond that, there were views that go right back to the science fiction books of Isaac Asimov, that what we have missed and should have done is we needed to ensure that the coding was moral, that it had a moral quality about it, so that no robot will harm another human being, or a robot should be built into its DNA, into its code. Now it's actually possible, and there are robots that have been made. The same drones that your children can buy as toys can be used to deliver bombs onto war zones and stuff. And at the moment, we're trying to code after the event. We're coding late. We're trying to now see, can we code things that, where a gun, for example, an AI gun, will refuse to fire if it's aimed at another person. And they're talking about trying to create smart guns that cannot be violent, and so on. So that all comes from the idea also, it's not just about having rules, but it's actually in the code, in the design of the hardware and software itself. And of course, Yasumi, that takes us to the place where if it is true that when we create a robot dog, it's currently not sentient. One view is it will never be sentient, and others actually, believe it's not long before AI will start to demonstrate, as it speaks back to us in natural language, or as it communicates with other AI in languages it might create, that it might create its own morality, but also its own sentience, and it might therefore need to be protected as well. Or it might even create its own protection. If we give it physical agency, suddenly the AI may turn on us and say, I don't agree with your morality. It creates a kind of alien morality that we don't identify as morality. One of which could be, for example, and this is in science fiction stories like science fiction movies like Star Trek, it could be that as AI integrates with itself more, its new morality might be a bit like the Borg in Star Trek, the collective, that it sees individuality as a kind of illness. And so its morality is that we are a problem to be solved and that we need to be assimilated. And I know that sounds terrible, but actually it's very philosophically plausible that AI might become more efficient by combining brains rather than having separation and individuality. So do we code that? Do we have to have laws for AI as well as for ourselves?
Yeah, so it was a great discussion covering the first part of general AI. So we talked about how the rise of AI, the challenges, ethical considerations, role of the regulation, and how it can impact our lives and jobs. So
since we have covered the first part of our today's discussion, I have a question for you guys, my audience as well. What are your biggest concerns or hopes surrounding the rise of AI? Share your thoughts in the chat, in the comments, so that I'll be picking up those important questions and your concerns, and we'll be having another time with Paul to address these questions. So I'll be bringing up some live discussions as well. You can join. Do comment on it.
So let's move on to the Technosophy Unveiled. So it's a topic and the concept is very particular and close to your heart, Paul, since you have a book also published on it. So for those who are unfamiliar to Technosophy, can you give us a clear definition of it and the role in understanding the relationship between Technosophy and the society?
Yeah, I first came across the term anthropology, which is a very established scientific field about the science, I guess, of human culture and human behavior and so on. And then came across a much less known word around a writer called Rudolf Steiner called anthroposophy. And without going into the detail of what is quite a mystical system of thinking, very applied in the world, very practically, anthroposophy was about wisdom of humankind rather than kind of science of humankind. So I got very interested then also in the word technosophy, which I heard first from a guy called Patrick Dixon, who's a thinker, a philosopher, an actor based in the UK. And a technosophic view, I guess there are different views of it, but I took the end of that word, Sophie, Sophia, meaning wisdom, the goddess of wisdom. I quite like the fact that that was there. So what does that mean, being wise? And one definition of wisdom that actually you find in lots of different systems is wisdom involves approaching things from different points of view. And that gets you closer to the truth. The more you get a different perspective on something, it's common sense. My mum tells me this is the best way to go about it. My dad tells me that. I go and ask a friend, and now I have 3 different points of view, which can make decision making more complex, but actually it can improve the wisdom around it because we draw on more experience and more views. So a technosophic view I also found in the early days of digital, where we started to find as researchers that companies like Apple in the early days of smartphones and some of the technologies and products, physical products that I would look at and go, that's beautiful. There's a beauty to it. There's an elegance in the design. Or that's a really smart and wise way of doing something, is you would often find that the design teams in those organizations were not just engineers. There's nothing wrong with engineers, and they're not just lawyers or economists, although we have lots of evidence that is what the boards of directors were mostly, and mostly, of course, male as well. Technosophic organizations had artists on the board. They had philosophers. Some organizations made products, even got dancers in. They got, particularly from the arts and the humanities. So a technosophic design was something that was designed by people with different disciplines, different disciplinary points of view. And so the book that I was involved in writing was a gathering of people from different backgrounds from all over the world, academics, industrialists, creative people who came together, and we looked at how you might design something technosophically. And so technosophy is the idea of we need to apply wisdom to design early on in the process, not just cleverness, not just intellect, not just the disciplines of economics, engineering and law, but also of philosophy, the arts and the humanities. And that's my belief about AI going forward. AI is raising all kinds of questions that you've raised, Yasumi, in this conversation. Just that one thought of what happens if AI starts to replace so many jobs and there is mass unemployment. We have to think technosophically about that. We have to think about how we decide what happens with technology. Technology doesn't become the ultimate thing to say we surrender to because it's relentlessly rising. We scrutinize it, we question it, we ask what needs it meets, what's its philosophical justification, not just its economic one. And this is a much more inconvenient and, for me, exciting way to dialogue around technology. And I believe it would lead to very, very different kind of technology in the future.
Yeah. So adding one point to what you told, so it won't replace the jobs actually, as according to my view, it will optimize and it will help to do our jobs easily by saving our time and all.
I think the difficulty, Yasumi, is let's take some real examples. At the Edinburgh Festival last year, which is the world's largest arts festival with over 3,000 shows, I started to hear the first examples. In fact, I was getting press releases, come and review our show. It has a voiceover. And voiceovers, often appear as theatre has become a bit more like film as well. And normally that would be a paid actor. The voiceover industry in the world is about $3 billion. This is a lot of people. Within a year, that could be almost entirely gone. In fact, most companies now that I've spoken to say, we just use an AI, it's really cheap. Those are people who are out of work. Now that's a $3 billion industry. If we start to have everything from just completely automated shops, automated taxi drivers, automated teaching, automated learning, automated factories, if we go that complete distance, we don't just get optimized employment, we get a completely new world where the only way that model can continue is if the people who no longer have jobs are still able to buy things. They're still in a capitalist system. So, this is Elon Musk saying, well, we'll come to a point where they get a universal basic income. We'll be given money somehow, and that will be enough to buy all of this stuff. I'm not sure I buy that. And I'm not sure I want my choices about what I buy to be curated by the very organizations that replace my jobs, who largely are committed to profit maximization, data control, and so on. So at the moment, I'm afraid optimization is often the convenient narrative to allow AI to continue. But I'm not sure that we should be going at the speed that we're going at, because if we went technosophically, we'd slow down.
Yeah, okay. Got your point. And so, why is it important to examine technology through a philosophical lens? And how Technosophy can help us to navigate the complex relationship between humans and technology we create?
Yeah. I mean, let me push that back too. I mean, do you feel that we are asking a lot of questions about how? This is a practical work. How do we do that? How do we do that? And we do it very quickly with tech. And now we even ask ChatGPT and it tells us how without us even needing to think. We often ask how, we ask what. Being implementers, we ask where and we ask when. And usually when we make teams, we quickly ask who. And now we're using AI to do job interviews. So we don't even need to ask that question. Do you think we ask why enough? Because that's the question of the philosopher. And I'm not sure we do. And I think we are going to regret and are already regretting that we don't ask why enough. And one proof of it is what's happening with climate change. We need to ask why a lot more. And that needed to be a value that was recognized and taxed. If we have tax relief on anything, we should have tax relief on the philosophical debt of an organization, because then they won't make such dumb and narrow decisions that have got us partly to the place where we are on a planetary scale right now.
Yeah, as you told, like from ChatGPT, we are asking what and how, but we don't ask why the question that much. So that's a powerful perspective. And I know that you have a book on this Technosophy. So why don't you tell about it to the audience as well, what it covers and what the AI enthusiasts can learn from it?
It's probably the book I don't recommend, because that book was written in 1990s and it was the result of a conference. So it's really the bringing together of 3 days of consideration about the future of technology back then. So it's quite an academic book. It's about £70. I think some library bought it. It's really the work that flowed from that. So you can absolutely go visit my website. You mentioned CATS3000, which you can easily find. And everything from that book and the ideas that came from it is available free on the website. So no one needs to buy any book. But what flowed from it for me, which has probably been part of my own life's journey, is trying to find a way of celebrating progress and technology, but matching it with wisdom, scrutiny, inquiry, and questions, because that's what I think we really need to do. Our smartphones are both a miracle, a way to communicate and connect, and the source of terrible addiction, cyberbullying, but tech neck, bad necks, all kinds of physical problems. The world of AI can enhance our thinking, but also it can replace our thinking. So we have students using it and they're not really going on the journeys of discovery that they used to if AI just gives them the answer. It's a paradox. It's a paradox of trying to find a middle way where we get the benefit from technology consciously, but we don't simply surrender to it. And that, for me, that's the idea of why people should, I think, engage with Technosophy. Ask yourself now, whenever you're about to make a big decision, what other perspective? Don't be just a technophile. Just because the technology is cool, that doesn't mean it's great. Ask what the weaknesses of it are. Look for the negative reviews, not just the positive reviews. Think about the consequences of what could be harming from technology, not just enabling us. Ultimately, we've been groomed with the idea that it's uncool to criticize technology, that somehow we have a fear of missing out, that somehow we are cool because we have the latest smartphone, we're on the latest platforms and so on. And yet we know that TikTok is partly being banned because it has a negative side, not just a positive side. And I think it's a shame if it's banned. We need to find a way where we get the benefit from it. But to do that, the people that make TikTok have to really open the doors to criticism. They have to be not defensive. It's not a PR exercise when people criticize you. You need to welcome it. And so I think TikTok probably needs to open the doors to have people on their board of directors and their design team who make them really uncomfortable, because that will make their technologies innovate.
Yeah. So I felt like TikTok is a good way of branding our things. So that's why I choose it. So easily we can get an audience. If you are into AI, that AI things will be coming up like that, like more than scrolling the YouTube and all that. It help us to grow our audience if you are a content creator, especially.
But you know, I mentioned Yasumi, this, I'm being deliberately simplistic, maybe because I use this to try and explain this to myself, and actually some wiser people than me used to tell me this as a child when I went into the garden, which is they pointed out that if you plant something in the ground, if you keep digging it up every 5 minutes to see how it's doing, it never grows. In fact, you kill it. You have to develop the beautiful patience to go 2 days later, there's something coming through. And I think the danger, and that's a human thing, it's clearly there in nature, the danger of putting out your TikTok video in the morning and then having notifications on that keep telling you got another like, somebody followed you, someone liked you, is I think that little drip feed, which we know it becomes addictive. And we know that when people keep leaning over their phones, their necks are going to be, we have kids, 20-year-olds with neck problems. Is actually, we've got evidence, a lot of evidence that you're much more productive and your well-being is better if you put the TikTok video out, if you like to do it because it's creative at 9 a.m. Go check it at lunchtime, after a lunch, not even before lunch. Eat your food, taste it, enjoy it, and you will get such a depth of joy if you get good likes, 50 likes, and the comments, and you read them, that immersing longer into something and less often actually is better for the human mind and for most people's well-being. Not everybody, but for most of us. So there is a mastery, there is a skill set that actually is very inconvenient to selling adverts, of getting us staring at screens, but might actually be better for human beings. And so there could be a kind of artisan behavior, like craftspeople, to the digital world that we need to learn and teach our children, that is not the same as this constant flow of addiction.
Yeah, so that is, I believe we have to have the self-discipline in ourselves. So in so I also have a TikTok account. That is because I need to get some audience, and I have limited visiting TikTok just 10 minutes per day. So more than that, I don't visit, so the notifications comes and like that. So I believe that.
Do you feel more at peace doing that? Does that make you feel calmer?
Yeah, so everything will have the bad side, so we have to carefully get the good side of these things and move on. So, and I just wanted you to share an example of how Technosophy can be applied to a real world situation.
So beyond mentioning, I think when you design products and services, you get as many different viewpoints around the table that you actually iterate probably slower than we currently do. So that's kind of on the business side. On the personal side, and this is what my book Digital Inferno was all about, and I mentioned the artisan thing. I think a technosophic view is usually technosophic because when you look back or you tell a story, people nod their head and go, that was the wise thing to do. People recognize wisdom, and often they want to try that for themselves. There's a lot of stuff. It is from the thing I mentioned about, I call it placement, putting your devices away at night, you know, having good sleep, waking up in the morning. And if your energy is 6 a.m., that's when you write. That's when you put the laptop on, go down, have a coffee, do some writing, but then turn it off again. So there's something about, it's almost like magic with a magic wand, invoking and dismissing digital. We need to have the freedom to do that. That's not the same as digital assistants like Alexa constantly listening. We absolutely, it's technosophic to have the ability to forget, to actually delete things that are deleted forever. And anybody that goes on, I think it's called archive.org, the Internet Archive, you realize that there are snapshots taken of all your data all the time. I have a website from 2002 that was never deleted. I'm not allowed to delete it. And so I don't think it's wise. The human brain is not supposed to be filled with endless memory. We know that it's good for our mental health to be able to forget things, to let things go. And so for me, they're the examples. They're quite human ones. But ultimately, it's the human's ability to consciously invoke or dismiss the digital realm at will. And that will needs to be mobile and free.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So this was a great and fascinating conversation I had with you. So before ending our discussion today, what are some key takeaways the viewers can get from about this rise of AI and the concept of technosophy?
So I think some of the tips are, for your own well-being, less is usually more. I think immersion is something that needs to be something that you decide to do. So you might decide once a week on Friday, that's my real digital day. That's when I really immerse. But then it's family time at the weekend. So this ability to invoke and dismiss is really key. The ability to place digital. If you received a text straight after this interview from a friend and it was really emotional, and you feel, actually, I need to rest after this interview, you don't start replying immediately with your fingertips. You have a coffee, you have a tea, you go for a walk, you think what you want to say. So there's something also about placing and being skillful digitally that's really, really key. And then there's some really boring stuff now, which is simply about controlling your data, being really careful about your digital footprint, thinking carefully about what you're putting out there onto the internet that may never be deleted, and seeing sharing of content as much, much more sacred. I think we're going to find evidence more and more that content itself is abusive. We're not supposed to hear lots of things at once. Our brains can't take it and shouldn't take it. So if someone keeps telling you stuff, a bit like what I'm doing now, the nature of it is it's like being smashed in the face all the time with content. Much, much less content that we curate is far better for us in the world. And one day I hope we tax content. That will solve financially the world's problems. We don't need to have endless content poisoning us all the time. And I know that's a big thing to say, but one of the ways I invite you to test that is to have a day, not digitally detoxing with no digital, is to have a day where you choose exactly when you're going to digitally engage. And you'll notice it's much less content and you taste that content much more effectively.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. So when you talk coffee, so you are trying new restaurants as well, right? I can remember we were doing the project. Yeah, you were trying new restaurants, you know. So today's discussion was awesome. I learned a lot from you, and I also have some key learnings from you to continue. Thank you very much, and I hope I can get you for another future discussion. So we have a lot to discuss, as you told. You are like a library to me, so there are many things I can learn, many topics we can cover. So thank you for joining me with the quick asking, like I asked it also like few days ago, and you were giving your time. Appreciate your time with your busy schedule. Have a good day to you. Until we meet again, have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Yasumi. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
So we are coming to the end of our discussion. I have another question for my audience. How does Technosophy resonate with you? Do you see its influence in your daily life? Share your thoughts in the comments. So we will be taking those things in our future discussions. Hope you enjoyed today's discussion with Paul. For more thought-provoking discussions like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel Yasumi and hit the notification bell icon so you won't miss anything. Until next time, see you. Bye bye.